This is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 38, My Dying Bride. This episode brought to you by Season of Mist. Visit seasonofmist.com and check out their web store where you can find new releases from Pentagram, Septic Flesh, and Cynic. just heard Sear Me on the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark Rudolph. Joining us is our special guest, Mr. Christopher L. Dick.
Hello.
And I'm Jason Hundy. We just heard Sear Me. And this is, of course, the first of our two-part episode of My Dying Bride. And we brought Chris in. We made him fly in from Philadelphia to specially record a few podcasts before we send him back on his way. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Welcome, Jason. Thank you.
Well, I'm always here.
Always.
Always here. Always Coca-Cola, man. But
sorry, we're also a gathering album.
We're getting paid for product placements now, yeah. So you'll hear a few layered in throughout.
We went mainstream.
My Dying Bride, and the record that we just heard something off of, As the Flower Withers. You guys, of course, got into Bride a lot sooner than I did. Actually, As the Flowers Withers, I didn't get this until I think after I had Like Gods, yeah. So
late bloomer.
Yeah, I'm a late bloomer, a bit of a late bloomer here. But that song in particular, Mark and I picked it because we feel like it really kind of encapsulates everything that the band is sort of about. So what are we talking about here?
The drum beat there is almost like the quintessential Bride drum beat, just like almost the Carcass drum beat. That we've. I don't know how many times that beat has been recycled by 50, 60 other bands. So.
Sure. I mean, also the fact that Sear Me's been re-recorded by Bride about 40,000 times. So
yeah, there's like Sear Me 14, Sear Me 15, and
yeah, I think when they're hard up for material, they just say, "Hey lads, let's record Sear Me and call it, put a Roman numeral after it and be sad about it, and everyone will like it." So I think that is the sort of the quintessential early Bride song, just because it encompasses everything Bride was. They were sort of this brutal, weird death metal act, but at the same time they were this melodic, melancholic doom act from Yorkshire,
with really super romantic gothic overtones sort of mixed in, like a lot of sort of obsession with kind of a medieval type atmosphere and medieval instruments. I mean,
sure. In
a certain sense. I think one of the most obvious things that people will stick on My Dying Bride is the fact of not Calvin but Martin's presence with the violins,
right.
Which adds a very classical.
This is one of the first really integrated violinists I think in a metal that I can think of. But.
Sure, and I think it distinguished My Dying Bride from Anathema and then in Paradise Lost as well, because they were just your usual guitar, bass, drums, doom metal, whereas My Dying Bride added that. And they added speed as well, but that violin really set them apart and allowed them to see that whole romantic aspect was sort of made more realistic with a real violin player, real violin movements, real violin notes, all that stuff. So that's definitely those were definitely sort of hallmarks of My Dying Bride. That and Aaron's infatuation, at least early on, with Latin.
Yeah. Which I don't think we're doing anything with Latin singing on it today, but. There were a couple songs on this record that had Latin lyrics, if I'm not mistaken. Do you remember which ones in particular?
No, I just remember the Symphonare EP. I think that was largely most of the Latin stuff. I think.
Well, actually, I apparently just lied, because Sear Me was all Latin, which we just heard, and that's weird because it's a song as I hear it, I don't really even think about the words or pay attention to what he's even yelling. It's just almost.
I kind of thought I knew what the lyrics were, but apparently I don't. So, I've been fake singing along to them.
Latin's a dead language, and they're singing a lot about death, so it sort of works out. But As the Flower Withers was kind of introduced along with the Symphonare EP, which came out I think in 91. Yeah, 91, and then As the Flower Withers was 1992. These sort of both put them on the map as being were they the final of the Peaceville 3 to premiere, or was that Anathema?
Anathema. Okay. Anathema was the final, because I think they were. Paradise Lost came out. My Dying Bride came out a year or so later, a year and a half later, and then I think followed another year and a half. I think then in 93, I believe that's when Anathema finally hit.
All right.
I think so. Either late 92, early 93.
Yeah, I think
with the full album.
Yeah, with Serenades, I think was 92.
Yeah,
93,
they had the EP first.
Yeah, was that Crestfallen first? Yeah.
Yep.
So, and of course, if you've been a loyal downloader and listener of Requiem Metal Podcast, then we've done already the Paradise Lost show, and we've also done the Anathema show, so it was kind of high time to do My Dying Bride. The biggest problem you have with My Dying Bride is that, especially in their first like 3-4, the first 3 or 4 releases are the longer song lengths, which obviously that was a 9-minute song you just heard to open things up there. But it's because they almost, I think, in a way, were doing things with sort of a classical music sort of sense of movements and things like that, and they sort of let the music breathe a lot longer. Whereas I feel like Paradise Lost was writing more like kind of song, verse, chorus, that kind of stuff. Yeah, and Anathema had longer songs early on as well, but nothing really as epic, except maybe some of the stuff on like Pentecost, that was as long as what Bride sort of typically did, Yeah,
I mean, usually Bride's music was done in movements, which is that classical concept. So, I mean, that's why you have these long songs, just because they want to encapsulate, the brutal moment. They want to have the beautiful moment. They want to have the sad moment, and then they want to repeat it or change it, mix it up. So that's kind of why a lot of the songs tend to be long. And plus, the tempo is usually is very slow, so that sort of draws the things out a little bit as well.
Yeah, which is odd, because one of the things you notice, I think, the most about As the Flower Withers, and you'll hear this in the song we open the next setup with, is how fast at times their early work could be. I mean, they really were still entrenched in death metal in a lot of ways, kind of that death doom, tone that line, which you hear like in the first Paradise Lost, the Lost Paradise record was.
You don't
really,
hear the speed though. That's the difference.
Yeah,
not that speed. But I think something to mention is Rick's drumming is. That's
very odd.
It's very different, but it's instantly recognizable, almost like Andy Whale from Bolt Thrower. I can instantly recognize. He's got like certain patterns that he always does
all the time.
The time. But I think it works with the music. And Rick, I think, kind of did the same thing. And it even like when Sean Steele plays drums in Bride, he even kind of mimics some of those things as well. So.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we already mentioned Martin and with the violin, and then I think Aaron's singing style, which I think Chris mentioned, is one of the other sort of anchors of My Dying Bride. You don't hear it as much in the song we just heard, Sear Me, because he's doing mostly just sort of death stuff, but he's doing something kind of unique that you were like noticing, almost kind of what Nick Holmes was doing, that sort of just brutal.
It's incredibly guttural, but then it seems to even like, it doesn't decay as quickly as Holmes' vocals do, I think. But Aaron's vocals are just oddball altogether. I can't think of another, guy that necessarily sounds like him. And the weird thing, a lot of guys I knew that were into like grindcore and like more, quote unquote hipster, kind of metal stuff, they seem to like Bride for some reason.
Well, and this is also, as Mark and I were kind of commenting on, this has always been a band. I don't know if it's because of that sort of romantic classical element that girls have always been into.
Yeah, I mean,
the
imagery on it's pretty, and just the whole package is very different from any of the other, like, Peaceville 3.
Yeah, for sure. Because on occasion, like a lot of the non-metal girls or non-metal people that I hung out with would like some of the later Anathema stuff, or maybe even the later Paradise Lost stuff, which was more clean vocal driven and stuff. But they always dug what Bride was doing. It seemed like, because of those classical elements or those beautiful moments of like the violin. I think that violin did so much for them early on to make them stand out.
Aaron was really singing his guts out. No matter whatever he sung, you believe it. You could really tell by his delivery that he knew what he's talking about.
Yeah, and we'll hear that, especially later on when we get to like From Darkest Skies and Two Winters Only, where it's just like, his heart's just laid out on the table for people to kind of hear. I guess what I'm sort of curious about before we jump into this next set is like where your guys' associations came into contact, like the first time you guys discovered Bride and, with doing the Requiem and stuff.
I'll defer to Chris's memory on this.
I mean, excuse me. I think the first memory I have of My Dying Bride, and I can't remember where I heard it actually. I think it probably came through one of these flyers in the mail when you trade letters back in the day. You got a bunch of other flyers and these letters. And I assume there was probably an advertisement for Paradise Lost, Anathema, and My Dying Bride all on the same little sheet. And, of course, if you like one, you're going to probably like them all. So if you buy, a Paradise Lost, then you're probably going to like My Dying Bride. If you like My Dying Bride, you're probably like Anathema. So I think what happened was you start to search these things out. You go to the record store, you special order these things. They're all in import at the time. So we had a great record store in Flint, Michigan called Wyatt Earp, who carried all the import stuff. You rarely had to special order anything. Wyatt Earp's famous for the Repulsion Connection, obviously.
We talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
We make
anybody that listens to the show a couple times.
So we shopped there. I mean, we actually made like special trips from our hometown of Mount Pleasant, which is like 2 hours away, hour and a half, whatever, to go there and shop. I mean, that's because that's where we could find stuff. We wouldn't have to special order. We wouldn't have to wait, which is like a mail order concept. So we could just go there, find stuff, buy it, and leave. So I think my first impression was probably finding something on a flyer, making a special drive down to Ann Arbor, or sorry, not Ann Arbor, to Flint, to Wider to get these things. And you walk in, and they probably had it. These old clear long can't even talk anymore. Clear long boxes with the artwork on top, the jewel case on the bottom, and that's probably started the infatuation with My Dying Bride, or the fascination with My Dying Bride, just because it was so different from Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost was really sort of melodic, melancholic, doomy, and deathy. But Bride
they were
had
kind of drawing on Celtic Frost. Stuff
exactly.
you had heard before.
Right. But My Dying Bride had something else completely. They had the whole Latin thing, then sort of the romantic element. They were really going for something, I think, a lot different. The artwork, the presentation was a lot different.
Yeah, Dave McKean did As the Flower Withers, a famous.
Yeah, did a lot of really nice photo collages on a lot of the 7 inches.
So from that, once you start that discovery process, you keep looking for more and more things, looking for things like that. But that's probably, if I remember correctly, that's how Mark and I discovered My Dying Bride. It was probably through a flyer, through the mail. Then go to Wide Earp and buy it. And then, anything else that comes out in Peaceville, we probably end up bought.
Cool. Yeah. I think the whole fact that we had to make this journey to get just one CD made them that much more
special
in our minds. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it was one CD. Usually we'd walk out with 3 CDs, and we would have all of our wherever we were working at the time, usually at a fast food restaurant. That usually was
our entire paycheck.
That was our entire paycheck for 2 weeks. But in the end, we didn't have money to eat, but we had money to listen to music.
We had metal.
We had doom and death metal. So I think that sort of fed us, intellectually and artistically, which was good.
Sure. Well, we're going to turn things back to As the Flower Withers. We're going to open up with a shorter piece, shorter but faster, a tune called Forever People. And then we're going to kind of quickly, you'll see in this next set, which will contain 3 songs, you're going to see the rapid development of songwriting that occurs, because it goes from As the Flower Withers into the Thrash of Naked Limbs EP, which was released a year later. It was a 3-song EP that, again, Peaceville Records put out and stuff.
I think it was originally a 10-inch or something, wasn't it?
Is that what it was? It was a 10-inch record before it was a CD?
Or a 12-inch record?
Well, I don't remember how Peaceville actually issued these things, but my first experience with that was a 12-inch EP. It could have been available on CD, but I bought the 12-inch in Chicago, and that was what they had.
Yeah. Well, and you'll see from a songwriting standpoint in the second song, you just a giant leap, and then of course it really crescendos with the song we'll end with, called "The Songless Bird," and that's off a record we'll get into in the next set called "Turn Loose the Swans." So we're gonna hear "Forever People," "Thrash of Naked Limbs," and "The Songless Bird." Enjoy.
Go Look at your God, look at the way he stands. They use a rhyme, but the rest I yourself. Let me show you all my pain. Suck on his latest ways to your right, and leave you blind. Gone is the day.
Welcome back. You just heard The Songless Bird, Thrash of Naked Limbs, and we started things off with the Ever Fast Forever People. which is named after a Jack Kirby comic, right?
I think that's a coincidence.
Oh, okay. Well, you never know. Metal
Kirby,
comics, it all kind of goes about the nerddom. But let's talk a little bit about Songless Bird, which we just heard, and the record that it came from, which of course most people consider to be the crowning achievement, the Hall of Fame record, whatever you want to call it, which is Turn Loose the Swans, which was released in 1993, in fact.
The year we graduated.
Yes, it was.
Wow. I was
college. No.
Yes, yeah. I was graduating 8th grade at that time. So.
Wow.
My specific memory of this one, and I don't know if we want to go into this, but our specific sort of memories of this. I remember by this time I was actually getting service from Peaceville, thanks to a guy named Andy over at Andy Turner, I think his name was, over at Peaceville.
Apparently so was I.
So
is it a promo?
Yeah.
That's a Futures version, not the original Peaceville.
It's good.
So anyway, I think I was working a late shift, so I obviously got the mail before then. And I remember getting a package from Peaceville that day, and in it was this record. And I remember driving out to, work. Where Mark and I think we both worked at the same time at Burger King. And I think holding it was like holding the Holy Grail. And I think I brought it in, and we both looked at it, and we're like, "Holy shit!" Couldn't wait to play it. Couldn't wait to play it. And when we finally did, I think our jaws simply just dropped. I mean, we were completely floored by it. It was such a huge momentum shift
It's a huge jump
in sound.
So,
well, the thing I remember about this record, which is weird, is I was a junior in high school, and I had already gotten like Angel in the Dark River and like Gods of the Sun. And I was driving down to visit my friend Shane in West Virginia, and you had just lent me this on cassette tape, and you're like, "Oh, here, borrow this. This is cool." And I just remember, listen to it, and like Your River came through and stuff, and it was different. And then that opening riff of Crown of Symphony, came on, or Sympathy, and I just kept rewinding it and going, "Holy cow!" And then Turn Loose the Swans, the title track, came on, and that part where he yells "Turn Loose the Swans,"
right.
Like near the end of the song.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, "Holy hell!" Because all I had heard was I hadn't heard his death vocals before, really, and so this was like a weird introduction because he didn't do any death singing by the time Angel in the Dark River and As the Sun rolled around. So it was kind of a shocker for me in a different sort of way, but. Just the dynamicism of all the songs. I mean, you heard some of the pinch harmonics, and which kind of
that came in big time.
And pinch harmonics really become almost the trademark of My Dying Bride.
It's like the melody line, really. I mean, you've got the muted palm stuff, the chugging, and then you've got the harmonics, and that almost constructs the song like kind of bizarre, not necessarily the most. I guess normal way to produce this or to visualize a song that way. Like Paradise Lost did that to some degree, but not as the entire song. Yeah,
well, and they kind of piggybacked on a little bit what Paradise Lost was doing, but like Anathema was sort of known for like their control of feedback, and I always felt like My Dying Bride was known for like some of those pinch harmonics, and you hear them throughout the rest of their career. Really, I mean, they're pretty common. Along with the violin, those were kind of like the two things that were sort of jumping out.
Sure. The weird thing about this one is obviously, Sear Me is re-recorded.
Yep.
The first time.
It says version. Oh, wow.
That's Sear Me 1993.
Yeah, there you go. It's not version 1993.
The fact that
it's not the 1993rd version.
Right. Exactly. It's from 1993. Yes.
We're just trying to trip Chris up.
Sure.
Make it fun.
But I think the interesting thing about this record, there's actually two or three things. First, they re-recorded Sear Me, which is kind of strange. I mean, usually at the time, I don't think bands really re-recorded their own material and sort of updated it and changed it and sort of tweaked it a little bit.
And if they did, it was always just like demos, old demo recordings.
So this is a final polished version, re-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I think they finally took control of their own artwork. Aaron did a lot of the artwork for it.
And by Aaron, we're talking about Aaron, the vocalist.
Stainthorpe, the vocalist.
And I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second because we've sort of superseded the whole part of who the heck's in the band. We've got the two guitar players, which we'll refer to from time to time, Andrew and Calvin in the early years. Of course, we mentioned Martin, who's the violinist and keyboardist, Rick, and his specialty with drumming. And then there's a bass player, Aid. So, and they pretty much were a stable lineup through most of this era that we're going to be exploring on part one.
Up until like Gods of the Sun, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Chris was sort of mentioning, the artwork in particular that Aaron did, and the last record, As the Flower Withers, the cover was done by Dave McKean, who was, he was a comic artist. He did a lot of
collage artist.
Yeah, he did like a lot of the Sandman stuff, right?
He did. Well, yeah, he did the Paradise Lost.
Shades of God.
Shades of God cover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but anyways, not to focus on Dave McKean, because the great thing about this cover was, and I remember being fascinated by it as a younger kid, like staring at it and going, "What the heck is this?"
Yeah.
You know. And then once, of course, it was revealed that it's sort of a close up of the praying hands of the Madonna. Like kind of is that like a photo negative?
Yeah, it's just covered in wax, and they use the photo negative instead of the positive.
I mean, it's just such a evocative image of like what the sort of religious, romantic, gothic, doomy aspects that really are what Bride was about.
Like the promo videos they did back in the day, but the whole like aesthetic visually carried on. Do you remember any of those, Chris?
Not too much.
Some of the promo videos, they're just very, I mean, it's like all traditional kind of stuff with, it's just, shot on a, probably like an 8mm camera, but they'll just do stuff with, flipping around, make things negative, or just do like weird, like solarization color washes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But really cool stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the imagery surrounding this. And then Chris, what was the third thing that was sort of coming at you? You mentioned obviously the re-recording of Sear Me, and then the photo, artwork change that was going on. Was there something musically that you saw as a big dynamic change?
Well, the vocals.
Oh, okay.
Aaron's vocals, he started singing more. Started singing, like I think Black God has a lot of normal singing.
And female vocals too. So
right, but I think the difference is that it's the male vocal starting to come out and sort of be mature and sing as opposed to growl, and I think that was a big distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll definitely hear two wonderful examples of this in the next upcoming set. We're going to play Your River and then the title track Turn Loose the Swans. And Your River is interesting because to me it's this giant, like almost 2.5 minute like musical introduction before Aaron even sort of enters the picture.
Yeah.
And it moves through like all these different kind of dynamic movements of sound. It's almost like an overture piece or something,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Aaron comes in like the 2:30, 3-minute mark, and I mean just the way he sings is so mournful, but it's beautiful because it's clean and stuff like that, and you in a way he's almost establishing the aesthetics of what the record's going to be, that this is a huge change, and I remember reading like a poll back in the day. I think it was an online poll, and it had been voted by thousands and thousands of people, and it was like which song was sort of the favorite. And I remember like Carcass, it was Corporal Jigsaw, and for Bride it was Your River. That was the clear favorite by My Dying Bride fans was Your River. So, any thoughts on Your River or the title track Turn Loose the Swans?
None specific. I think they both sort of signify My Dying Bride moving forward, changing, maturing.
All right.
Great.
Cool. Let's listen to them. Here we go.
Until my bullets crack. A burning desolate sea. need. You burn my way. I live this own splendid. Victorious through the carnage. I wanted to touch them all. I wanted to touch them all.
That was Turn Loose the Swans and Your River from the second full-length record, Turn Loose the Swans. And one thing Chris wanted to mention was something about the getting back to the cover artwork.
Right, going back to the cover artwork. The CD, Chase was talking about the image. Each different format of the record had a different cover art, and I think for the time, that was pretty unique. I mean, most bands didn't go through the rigors of coming up on their own with 3 different images for the 3 different formats: cassette, vinyl, and CD. So I think that set My Name Bride apart from, say, their Anathema, Paradise Lost, who I guess by that time had sort of moved on.
I guess I always felt like, and you still see it today with what Catatonia does for Peaceville, and even like Still Life, which Opeth did for. I always felt like Peaceville really invested in the total product, the whole package of what they were presenting to people.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the ways, maybe one of the reasons My Damn Bride stuck around on Peaceville, because it's allowed them to be sort of as artistically creative as they need to with doing the Meisterwork stuff, doing live records, doing DVDs, doing.
Yeah, they're almost like the house band anymore. It's
right.
like.
I don't know if they want to be known as the house band, but
They're the ones that have stuck around the longest.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I mean, Catatonia has been on Peaceville for quite a while as well, but I'd say that they're kind of the two.
I think this is the only band from the early '90s still on the label.
Yeah, because
Autopsy's still on the label, but in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think Abscess has put out some stuff on.
Was it Abscess? I thought Abscess was on Relapse.
No, for one record.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Not that we want to talk about Abscess on a My Damn Bride show. So, but then things really sort of take an interesting turn in a way with the next record that we're going to get into, which is The Angel in the Dark River, because I think the most distinctive thing about it, besides another really kind of evocative photo of what appears to be a naked woman covering herself,
clutching her breasts.
Yeah,
yeah. This is the negative version.
Oh, okay.
I think the original version was white.
It was white. Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually that's the re-release because it has the extra tracks on it. It has that live.
It's got the Live at the Dynamo CD,
Yep.
but because the original is white, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the one I have signed by the band. But the one thing that you hear a lot on this record is the lack of any death vocals. I mean, they're kind of gone at this point.
Yeah, they are completely gone.
They'll be gone for the next 3 records, I think,
Yep.
and then they finally come back. And you'll hear in part 2, Light of the Darkness. So, you in particular said that when you first got this record, you listened to Two Winners Only like over and over and over again. I mean,
yeah, and that song's
the
really,
mood on this record is so.
That song's incredibly sparse, but I mean, for an introspective, teenager, it was pretty engaging stuff. Yeah, I remember, but just his like vocal delivery on that, it totally like, transports you away,
This record was always the one that like my girlfriends or whomever, they would always like own this and really get into this record in particular.
A super bleak record. I think it might be one of their bleakest.
I think so. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Subject matter and just the tonality of the entire thing.
I mean, even like the way that it opens, even though we're not going to play this song, a lot of people are familiar with The Cry of Mankind, and just, for 4.5-5 minutes at the end, it's just this repetitive kind of foghorn mixed with what is the sound that they're sort of creating there at the end? I mean, it makes me think of like boats moving through like fog.
No, it sounds like the
lighthouses,
horn,
and just a real evocative atmosphere that's going on here, and some of the best violin work that I think Martin's ever pulled off. Especially like on the tune we're going to open things up, which is From Darkest Skies, which has so many different kind of dynamics to it, from the super bleak, clear vocal opening, which we were kind of laughing about earlier. Aaron's vocals are easily mockable in some ways, even though we really appreciate him. I mean, he's almost so like sad
I'm trying
and depressed.
To impersonate him,
yeah. Mark does some wonderful impersonations, which maybe he'll share with us later in another episode. So, any other thoughts? Like when this came out, was this a shocker to people? Because
absolutely. I mean, I think that this record sort of was a dividing record for most people, because I think they expected the death metal vocal thing to continue, and when Aaron didn't, and they didn't continue, the record's heavy, no doubt. I think, but the death metal aspects of the record sort of ceased to exist, or the death metal aspects of the band ceased to exist. So I think when you came out with a record that has zero death metal vocals and almost zero death metal atmosphere, it's almost like, well, is this the same band I liked on Loose the Swans? Is this the same band I liked on As a Flower Withers?
Mm-hmm. It almost had a weird 4AD feel to it.
Right, and the cover looks like that as well. It looks like something you'd see on 4AD.
And I mean, for all the sort of musical influences that they took from like Paradise Lost or Candlemass or some of the traditional doom, I mean, the only band I could say that they were really drawing from was sort of like Into the Pandemonium, kind of like Celtic Frost in terms of their approach to it. Of doing some sort of like almost avant-garde metal record.
I hear some Fields of Nephilim and stuff as well.
Certainly some of that type of stuff as well, which they were British, weren't they? Fields of Nephilim,
Yes.
Kind of British goth movement. So, and Sisters of Mercy, I know Nick Cave was always a really big vocal influence, and for Aaron, and this really comes through. I mean, it almost feels like the same sort of bleakness that you hear in like murder ballads from Nick Cave, where you're just totally. Like, geez, slit your wrists, lay in a bathtub kind of stuff.
Right.
And especially too.
That's what they were going for.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's what they were.
Your girlfriend's just left you, or your wife's just left you, and that's your out.
Different than I remember the Nick Holmes interview where he's talking about writing lyrics. I have to be totally depressed if the dog takes a crap on the kitchen floor. That makes me real depressed. So he was more of a tongue-in-cheek writer. I think Aaron really kind of
lived it in some ways. Almost the same way that Jonas from Catatonia tried to like really capture the realism of bleak, existence.
I think the difference with Aaron, though, I mean, Aaron, when you talk to him, whether interview or personal, I think he's kind of a jolly guy in a weird way.
So you think he was being melodramatic?
No, I don't think I think he's realistic about things. I think that, but he's not a guy that you go up to and he's wearing black eye makeup and has black nail polish and thinks the world is shit. I think that I think one interview I was doing right before the interview, he was walking his dog and having a grand old time. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a normal guy, but expresses his feelings and emotions in a different way. I mean, he puts it to music, puts it to lyrics. So if he's having a down moment, it just doesn't go internally. He externally projects it in the music and in the lyrics. So that's why it seems over dramatic or melodramatic. You really hear him actually put it out there. So, and I think that's different from, say, Nick Holmes, who's obviously a little bit more sarcastic. I mean, that's Nick.
It's a kind of British humor
in a nutshell. Yeah. I mean, Aaron's a funny guy, but I think
he did wear those puffy shirts there for a while. Those puffy pirate shirts on stage.
The puffy pirate shirt phase was, he's wearing other get-up now. He's wearing this leather thing.
Isn't he wearing like a straitjacket looking thing?
Yes. But he's projecting is real. But it's not always like who he is, which I think is kind of a nice thing to have. I mean, it's not when you talk to the guy, he's just down and out. Yeah. He's a regular guy.
He can detach from his persona.
Well, I remember listening or hearing interviews, or I don't know if this is one we did or not, but where he's actually talking about it was like the 0 hour and he hadn't come up with any lyrics yet because he wasn't like in that
he wasn't
mindset.
In the mood, right.
For this record, you're saying? Or just other records?
One.
Oh, okay.
I think it was actually for Like Gods.
Yeah, because that was when we met him after that record. It was the first time I met him. I think maybe... Had you guys met him or seen him live before that time? Not that I want to get into that too much.
I think I have.
No, that was the only time we saw the one.
And we'll talk about that in part 2 when we get into Like Gods of the Sun. So, but all right, cool. Well, let's hear From Darkest Skies and 2 winners only from The Angel and the Dark River.
God, you're sorry. will be piled upon me that I can't see. My God, I've cried for us more than once, but rivers still run with the reddest tears. Be lost in me, and I'll never need Try We could change the world and be here with me right now. Right now. Held you in my arms. In my arms. My sweat so that could live forever on earth in peace. But my tears they fall for you only.
That was Two Winners Only and From Darkest Skies from The Angel in the Dark River. And Chris, you wanted to mention the kind of influence that you see in some of what My Dying Bride were doing from the 4AD artist, what was his name again?
Vaughn Oliver.
Okay, and he was the in-house guy for 4AD?
Well,
or?
he was a graphic designer outside of it. I think they had a company called 23 Envelope. And they were responsible for like the Cocteau Twins, This Motor Coil, artists like that. And I think, obviously My Dying Bride, specifically Aaron, took notice of that and tried to come up with his own version of it. I mean, he didn't have it wasn't as elaborate as as Vaughn Oliver, but he definitely took inspiration from that.
Cool.
It had the same kind of minimalist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like everything, you didn't like, it wasn't just covered with textures, it had a specific font, a specific high contrast photograph or whatever.
Exactly right. Yeah, there was a specific typography as well. I mean, everything was very simple, very readable, but very clean.
Mm-hmm. And where we're going to sort of, move as we end things with part one here, the My Dying Bride show, we're going to move back to the third of their kind of three major EPs that they had put out, which was the I Am the Bloody Earth EP. And all of these were eventually collected on an album called Trinity, right? Yeah,
and the version I've got, I believe it's called The Stories. It's like a big slipcase box that, when did that come out, 95, 96?
Do you remember, Chris? I can't remember because I don't have it.
You'll never find it, so just trust me.
You'll find it on eBay, maybe.
Yeah, maybe on eBay. But it's a collection of the three EPs, which started with the Symphonaire Infernus et Spira Imperium, which was the very first thing that Bride put out. And then, of course, we heard already from the Thrash of Naked Limbs EP. And then this is the third of kind of the early stage of EPs, which is I Am the Bloody Earth. What's interesting is this actually came out before Angel in the Dark River, and this is really one of the last places you hear in the early years of Bride the death vocal influence, right?
So later records, yes.
Yeah,
this song really, it seems like they're kind of getting it out of their system. It's like one last hurrah,
right?
With that ex-girlfriend or something.
I mean, it almost reminds me what Bride does with having these EPs in between. You and I were kind of talking about this. I don't know if you would agree, Chris, that it's very similar to what Catatonia did in their early years, where they would sort of work things out, like on the For Funerals to Come EP, or on the, Saw You Drown, or on the other one that's escaping me, that came out right before Saw You Drown, with Michael on vocals.
Sounds of Decay.
Sounds of Decay, thanks, yeah. In the same way, Bride was kind of following that same sort of formula, and kind of doing more experimental things, or really, putting the finishing touches on an era and saying, okay, it's time for something new.
It seemed to document their career more so. Like, some people could have done, other bands might have done these songs and just like, well, this isn't what we want to do, let's just, chuck them. We're not even going to.
And I think that
it was always like a nice barometer to see where they're at.
Yeah, and I think that's why if you're looking for something interesting, that one record that's kind of interesting, it would be that Trinity record, because it's sort of an overview of the early years of Bride.
That's still available, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's been reissued.
See, you have the original EPs. Do you have the original EPs as well, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, I think I had one of them and sold it because I'm an idiot and needed something, and I eventually
Blind Guardian album?
Yeah, probably some $40 Blind Guardian import back in '97. But
I think with the EPs, I think Aaron has also publicly stated, at least publicly back in mid-90s, was that they used the EPs to sort of experiment. And the stuff that wouldn't fit on the full lengths, like electronic remixes or odd ideas that they maybe wanted to explore. I think Peaceville gave them the leverage to put those things out on these EPs, and you see it later on when they stop issuing the EPs. And in fact, I think that's the last one that they issue.
Outside of the oddball single or something.
Right, outside of the single. I mean, these EPs were sort of every other album. So I think they were sort of using that to sort of say, okay, we got this material, we want to experiment, we want to do this just to sort of get this out of our system. They throw in a 4 or 3 song EP, it's 30 minutes long, and that's what it is.
And on this one, the I Am Bloody Earth EP, they do a remix of Crown of Sympathy. And do you remember who was involved in that? Was that Bride that was doing that, or
I don't know if they did it themselves or they farmed it out to a local DJ or some artist that
It's not very specific.
interpreted the song as he saw fit, and Modern Bride accepted it and put it on the CD. So.
Yeah, and Crown of Sympathy is a tune that, if we had an extra 15 minutes, we definitely would have thrown out there because it's kind of an essential Bride tune from Turn Loose the Swans.
But yeah, you should really go out and buy a couple of these records too.
Yeah, I mean, especially
See what you're missing.
Turn Loose the Swans and Angel of the Dark River are probably two fairly safe, enjoyable buys. So,
right.
But we're going to close things out here with part 1 with, of course, I Am Bloody Earth. And again, Chris, thank you for being here, and you're going to stick around for a couple more, I think, right?
That's true.
That's the game plan. So
What they tell me.
if you're new to Bride and you
my
have
contract statement.
yeah, that's your contract. We hired you for at least 4 podcasts, so you owe us those.
Some
and a live record and an EP. So okay.
The mediocre Mexican food, is part of that contract. We've
Exactly.
already had that. That part's been fulfilled, so it's up to me to sort of go through and sort of impart my wisdom.
Well,
if it can be called wisdom.
And we appreciate that after the crappy Mexican food.
Yeah.
So, but if you have thoughts on Bride, or if this is the first time hearing, especially this early stuff, maybe you've been more familiar with the newer stuff, tell us what you think. Send us a comment, requiempodcast@gmail.com. And
leave us a review on iTunes or leave us a review on TalkShoe.
Yeah.
Where some of you guys download this.
Yeah. And tell your friends. Coasters and T-shirts on the way with the new year coming soon.
As long
So
as Jason pays for them.
yeah, exactly. Chris, aren't you investing in those with Decibel Magazine behind fronting that?
I can't speak on part of Decibel Magazine.
I thought for sure that was going to happen. So
No, Decibel Magazine is its own entity. Whereas
It has nothing to do with this whatsoever.
yeah,
No.
we'll bug Albert someday.
Whereas if I'm going to pay for something, I better get something back.
There you go. Anyways, we've babbled enough. So for Jason,
Chris.
enjoy I Am the Bloody Earth.